I'm going to share with you today an example of how the modern times can also help us to draw on the ancient science. It's so fascinating, the world we live in today. It's fascinating, and it can also be very difficult. We see the presence of terrorism and of wars and of famine and all of what seems to represent the dark side of life. And at the same time, we see gatherings like this where people are coming together to to bring the Sanatan Dharma, the ancient truth, the eternal truth, into active life in the world today. And while I was preparing the talk, I thought of a song that we don't sing often in Italy because we don't have a translation. Perhaps you do sing it here. It's one that is sung to the same melody as Door of My Heart, and the words are, "Today my mind has dived deep in thee, for thy pearls of love from thy depthless sea. If I find not, I will not blame the sea. I will find fault with my diving." And the message of this song, which Master wrote, is very important for us in applying the science of Kriya to our everyday life, our modern day life. Because, as Dave was saying, we can't just depend on the technique to do it for us. It's not the magic wand that suddenly changes us from a non-devotee into a devotee, or from a devotee into a devotee who experiences samadhi. The technique, as Dave has said, has to be put to work in our lives. We have to apply our energy both in meditation and in our daily life. And so this song is telling us that the pearls are there, the ocean of cosmic consciousness is there, the pearl of our self-realization, of being able to live in God consciousness is there. And every day when we dive deep into that ocean through our practice of Kriya Yoga, through our practices of meditation, we want to use those practices as well as possible in order to be able to find that pearl. Because if we just, for instance, if we are diving, but we're diving in the wrong place, we won't find that pearl. And what is the wrong place? We can dive, as we all very well know, into subconsciousness instead of into superconsciousness in meditation. We sit to meditate, and suddenly we find that we're half asleep, and we wake up. We can dive into the conscious mind in our meditation. And how many meditations do we spend having a conversation with the boss that we know we're going to have to talk to later today, and we're going through that in our meditation instead of diving deep. We're diving into the conscious mind that programs all kinds of things during our meditation if we don't keep it focused. What we want to do is to dive into the superconscious mind. And if we practice Kriya Yoga, the pranayam, the focus with Hong Sa, the concentration and the devotion, then that correct practice with the right diving equipment will take us to that experience of superconsciousness, of finding that great pearl that is beyond pricing in today's world, that pearl of wisdom, of divine joy, of divine love that will take us to our freedom, to our oneness in God. When we practice the science of Kriya Yoga, Dave gave a wonderful explanation of what it means, that it is a science. And for all of us, a part of that is always going to be questioning. You know, the scientist doesn't just state a truth and that's it. He questions that truth. He tries to figure out all of the things about it that need to be resolved in order for that to become a principle of science. And this questioning is a part of our life as Kriya Bonds. It's a part of our life as seekers. We need to be able to ask questions about the practices. We need to be able to ask questions about the experiences that we have in order to be able to find what is right for us and how to move forward on our path toward God. And I wanted what I want to share with you is an instance where one of our devotees was thinking about Kriya, his practice of Kriya, our Kriya initiations, Kriya reviews, all that we do with Kriya. And he started to have this doubt, and he began to think, well, we always talk about Kriya dissolving the seeds of karma at the spiritual eye, burning them up in the spiritual eye of our devotion. And yet what I'm finding as I read is that it talks about the seeds of karma in the spine and the energy that can dissolve the vortices of the seeds of karma that are lodged in the spine. So how is it exactly that this happens? I'm not finding the answer about this. And so he sent this question around. And modern day science provides us a wonderful opportunity for searching, for seeking, and that is the computer. And Shivani went on the computer and she found some wonderful words of Master that I want to share with you about this. We know from the autobiography of a yogi that Yogananda has told us that Kriya Yoga is the jet airplane path to God. And it is that because of its power to help us to dissolve our karma, because we can't come to God until we are freed of our karma. And so these readings that I'm going to share with you are Master's words about how meditation and Kriya Yoga help us to do that. And they're very inspiring and very they confirm and affirm what it is that we are doing with our practices and with our Kriya. So Yogananda says, brain cells saturated with evil thoughts are cauterized by the relaxed life force accumulating in the brain. Relaxed, that's an important word. A body-identified physical individual keeps his life force continuously identified with his muscles and senses. And we know that. We have that experience ourselves. When we're identified with our physical being, then we're much more aware of what's happening with the physical body, and all of our actions are through that and through the senses. But a spiritual meditative man keeps his muscles and body relaxed and his mind away from the senses, so that the life force is relaxed from the sensory motor nerves and is accumulated in the brain. That is why meditation is the best way of changing the brain cells and uprooting habits from the mind. So Master is confirming for us here that our practice of meditation, in which we are relaxing the energy from outward movement toward the senses, withdrawing that into the spine and up to the spiritual eye, he relax that energy in the brain, that is what helps us to give the brain and to withdraw that energy, and that accumulated energy in the brain is what helps us to free ourselves. It changes our brain cells. Master has always said that the practice of Kriya changes your consciousness because it changes the very cells of your brain. Then Yogananda says, this is a little bit more general, but very interesting, because even as Kriyabans, it's very, very easy for us to forget our divine self. It's very easy to forget who we really are and to live in our practical everyday life just the physical, the body, the sensual being, with a little touch here and there of our soul and our divine self. And he says, any individual being made in the image of God is potential divinity. But when a soul made in the image of God is identified with his body and sense pleasures, it forgets its own divine nature. Therefore, it acts against its own interest, and it sins against itself. If a prince squanders all his money on his wicked, pleasure-mad friends, wining and dining them, then he sins against his own interest. Likewise, when a princely soul caters to the temporary pleasures of the body, it forgets to concentrate on the everlasting, ever-new bliss hidden within. When we practice Kriya, especially with Kriya, with all of our meditation practices, it helps to it puts us in touch with that divine self within. And every contact with that divine self within gives more weight in our daily life on the side of who we really are, this divine potential that Master and all of the Masters have given us Kriya in order to realize. So our practice, putting into practice Kriya Yoga, brings a result in our everyday life of being more and more and more aware of our divine self. And then he talks about, this is the last one that I'll share with you, he's talking about karma and how it affects our lives, it comes into our lives, we have to deal with it. And he talks about how we can deal with it. And he says, the first two things he says is you can minimize the effect of the action. And he says we do this in the way that people go to doctors. You know, they go to a doctor in order to minimize the effect of the symptoms that they're feeling. And we can go to a spiritual doctor by practicing our techniques, by doing our energization exercises. We fill the body with energy, and that helps us to keep with us throughout our day the energy that keeps us in our higher self. So that's one way that we can mitigate karma. He says you can resist the effect of karma. And he says, especially if you can rely on the power of your mind, that our mind is extremely powerful. Applied with will, our mind can achieve anything. And so if we are finding our life filled with karmic tests, one of the ways that we can overcome that is by using the power of our mind to give that particular test the direction that it needs in order to take us beyond the test to the lesson that we have to learn from it. And so using our mind, we can become warriors of taking our karmic experiences in the right direction to learn the lessons that we need through the karma and enable us to be free of that karma. But then he says, and this part I want to read, because he says you can completely stop it. And this is what we as Kriyabans are doing with our practice of Kriya. We are able to keep the karma from expressing because we dissolve those seeds of karma. He says, but how are you going to completely break the hold that karma has on you? The only way that you can permanently stop the undesirable effects of past wrong actions is by removing the cause of those effects. Harmful past life seed tendencies must be cauterized from the brain. Then there will be no recurrence of any type of illness or other troubles arising from them. Roast them in the fire of wisdom. Man suffers because of his errors, and the root cause of error is ignorance. Therefore, seek the wisdom born of meditation, which removes forever from within you the darkness of ignorance. And this is the message that I want to leave you about the scientific practice of Kriya, that when we practice regularly, when we really put it to work by meditating with Kriya, it isn't just in our meditative life, but in our everyday life, that the wisdom that comes from Kriya, the experience of love that comes from the devotional offering through Kriya, the bliss that Dave talked about that comes from the experience of oneness in Kriya, all of those things will affect each and every one of us in our daily life and bring our modern daily life ever more in harmony with our soul and our spiritual life, so that there's no longer a separation, but that we're able to live day by day, moment by moment, in that bliss, in that love, in that wisdom of God.